Hello, my extraordinary women friends. Have you ever found yourself running on empty, even while doing work you love? Burnout is real and it's rising, especially for women entrepreneurs who are building big visions, raising families, leading teams, and holding it all. In today's episode of Extraordinary Women Radio, I am joined by Chris Vasiliadis, burnout buster, author of Ignition, and founder of Priority Wellness. Chris helps high achieving women design energized, burnout proof lives and businesses without stepping away from their purpose or ambition. Diagnosed with MS nearly 2 decades ago, she didn't just shift her lifestyle, she turned it into a mission. We talk about the evolving face of burnout, why slowing down isn't always the answer, and how we can reclaim vitality in ways that are actually sustainable. This is a conversation every woman should hear, especially the ones who have it all together, because success doesn't require chronic exhaustion, and you don't have to burn out to make an impact. Let's meet Chris Vasiliadis. Well, welcome to Extraordinary Women Radio, Chris. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Cammie, and I'm thrilled to be here. Excited to have our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you. I think it's really important right now. I think burnout is something that is out there that people are feeling, and I think burnout prevention is really important that we're talking about this. I'd love to start with your story. Let's start with your personal story of how you came into the world of focusing on burnout prevention in your work.
Absolutely. Happy to share that. So let me go back. About 3 years before I started my practice, Priority Wellness, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a chronic disease of the central nervous system with no cure. And that diagnosis came out of nowhere. No one in my family, even to this day, has anything neurological with them. So took me aback for a bit.
Totally.
Shortly after my diagnosis, I met with my primary care physician and I said, okay, I've got this diagnosis. It's my intention to live a fully active, healthy life. What should I be doing?
Yeah.
And she lined me up with all kinds of tests, and which resulted in more tests and trying out different things. And ultimately, that year, I call it the year of the lab rat. But I made a whole bunch of different lifestyle changes.
What kind of changes did you make?
Yeah, we learned I wasn't good with gluten. I don't have celiac disease, but gluten, I don't do well with it. So the decision was made to, okay, militantly get off gluten. I did some things to start actively managing my stress. Believe it or not, one of the physicians in my doctor's office also taught a practice called Qigong, which if folks have heard of Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Qigong is a form of Tai Chi, basically.
Yeah. So it's that movement, like you're very intentional with the movement, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's a form of standing Chinese meditation, basically, and you do different movements.
Cool.
Although it was interesting in that the class that I took, some people didn't even have the energy to stand at that time. So they would do it sitting on a mat or sitting in a chair.
Wow.
But you could still do like upper body movements and such. Luckily, I was able to do it standing. But I used that initially as a way to help manage my energy and manage my stress, and took on different other ways of managing stress. That first year also, I needed a nap every day to function. Luckily, it was just that first year. Fatigue is a really common symptom of MS, and to this day, many years later, I don't have that as a symptom. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
But in making all those changes, health and wellness progressively became more and more important to me, so much so that I wanted to help other people create their ideal state of health and well-being. So I made the decision to change careers, become trained and certified as a health coach, and basically hung up my shingle in the fall of 2008. And
so a while ago. It's the same year I started.
Ago.
Yeah, it was the year I left the corporate world. I didn't even start my business until 2010. So you've been doing this you've got a good foundation under you of a lot of years.
Yeah. And when I first started my practice, I focused on stress management. And then over the years, it's evolved into burnout prevention.
Yeah. And why was that? I mean, why did it evolve? It was the lead that really helped you evolve that.
Yeah, good question. So I would say more and more, and at the time, my primary audience is professional women, and it
Hmm.
still is to this day. But I
Yeah.
also work inside companies, so I work with both women and men. Um, but I would see repeatedly women running around like chickens with their heads cut off,
Hmm.
thinking that that's what they need to do, that thinking that's how they need to function to be successful. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no, that's not required. You could be successful. It doesn't require exhaustion. And I've discovered it's from energizing and aligning with what matters most.
Yeah.
So more people need to hear this. More people need role models of people who aren't running around like a crazy person
Yep.
and being successful in a different way.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the pivot for me of not just stress management, but almost kind of the bigger picture of
It's
burnout
like changing
prevention.
whole life approaches, right?
Yeah,
Versus
yeah,
just,
and
and it's kind of what you did with your own health is you changed a lot to make that journey work for yourself.
mhm,
And it's not just changing one or two things. It's actually,
right.
how we live.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about my work is I can line 10 different people up and ask you, okay, what's your ideal vision of your health and well-being? I'm going to get 10 different answers, and
Right.
they're all correct.
Right.
Because health and wellness is a huge umbrella,
Yeah.
and there's not one right way to do it. And further, what may have worked for you in your 20s and 30s might not work for you in your 40s,
Right.
50s, and 60s.
Right.
So I'm also very big into focusing on, well, what helping people figure out what's the combination of things that works for them in their current season of life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that burnout is more pervasive now than ever. Would you agree with that? I mean, do you see more and more of it with the clients, or has it been pretty steady?
Yeah, I do. And I think there's a couple of things. I think awareness has been increased about it. There's a
Mm-hmm.
language around it. And I think in many cases, companies are being asked to do more with less. So people are getting
Yeah.
overworked more often.
Mm-hmm.
So it's bubbling up more and more. So I feel it's a combination of all those things.
Okay. Okay. Um, Many women are feeling that weight of doing all the things, right? And then you've mentioned this: it's the business, the family, the leadership, the community. It's like they're holding all the balls in the air. What are some
Right.
of the hidden burnout triggers you're seeing right now?
Well, I think first of all, it is trying to be superwoman and
Yeah,
thinking like, oh, I have
I
to.
can do it.
No,
I have to.
who
That's
says?
if even not I can. I have to. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
have to. Or putting judgment on themselves like, oh, if I'm not keeping all the balls up in the air all the time, then there's something wrong with me.
right.
No. So I think that's a challenge, and kind of this perfectionistic syndrome, like I have to
Mm-hmm.
do everything, and it can only be me because I know the right way to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be self-defeating too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of ways, Cami, we get in our own way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And yeah, so there's that. There's uh, not being open. I know a lot of women genuinely care about people and want to help people, and sometimes that is a great quality, and it can work against us if we're constantly trying to help and serve all these other people and not paying attention to ourselves and our own
Yeah,
well-being. So we
yeah,
can overdo overextending ourselves.
right, right. And what do you see people feeling in their bodies when this starts to show up for them?
Yeah, so I think it can be helpful to go into a little bit about what burnout looks like and what the
Yeah,
definition of it is. So
definitely.
there's so there's three different components of it. The first is this sense of feeling depleted emotionally, cognitively, mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so what that could look like is anything from forgetting where you put your keys to forgetting someone's name to missing a deadline when you don't normally do these things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so so and just this kind of background feeling of just constantly being tired.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's one dimension. The second dimension is these feelings of cynicism or depersonalization. So cynicism, again, and that can look like having more of a short fuse or
Mm-hmm.
being more skeptical than usual. Depersonalization, a good example of that is think of a doctor who might be burnt out,
Yeah.
and they're wanting their receptionist to call in the next appointment, and instead of saying, "Oh, can you please call in Mrs. Jones?" say, "Oh, can you call in that next patient?" So that you're taking kind of the human out of the thing.
Take the human out. That's a really good example of that.
Yeah. So cynicism and depersonalization is the next component. And the final component is feeling ineffective or incompetent in your work duties, in your home duties, any aspects of your personal or professional life. Some people feel like that's a continuum, like you're exhausted for a certain period of time, then you get to cynicism and the depersonalization, and then you get to feeling ineffective and incompetent.
Right, so that it just getting worse and worse is what that continuum does.
Yeah, or you can enter it in any.
That's what I could see, places. Where you could really come from any angle of that.
Yeah. So and it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you had a bad day and like, oh, I'm so burnt out because I had a really bad day. Like, no, it builds up over time.
Yeah.
So I typically say most people who are going to notice that you're burnt out is not you. It's going to be if you share a home with someone, or
because you're probably short fused, or
like
they just notice you're not right, or like your normal bright cheery self or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So someone will say, something's off here, or your coworkers, or even your manager at work.
And I think that's important, right? I think that's really important, because I think, and I certainly have been in burnout phases in my life, and I know I didn't really feel, I would have never used that word until I was on the other side of it, and then it was like, holy smokes, and I know people around me saw it. So I think that's a really important thing, is that we don't often recognize it in ourselves.
Well, and it can happen slowly. It's kind of like, I'm reminded of the metaphor of like, if you put a frog in a pan of water and then you turn the stove on, like the frog's not going to start freaking out right away. If the heat goes up slowly, then it's almost too late. Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with burnout. It's kind of a slow draw of your energy, and a slow draw of the personality that is more vibrant, and a slow draw of feeling ineffective in your job. Again, none of that's going to happen overnight. But you kind of gradually like, oh, I'm slipping here. Or, So
I know we're often told to slow down, right? I mean, that's an easy thing to say. Oh, just slow down, right? And I say this a lot. I say pause, make the pauses in your life. But often, and women just don't really stop. And I see that in my clients. I see it, just in people I know. And it's, so it's like that when we tell people to slow down, it doesn't necessarily work, right?
I think it can if people think, it depends on what story people are telling themselves, because often what I hear from folks is, well, if I slow down, I'm not going to get all this stuff done. Yeah. Or if I slow down, I'm not going to get caught up, I'm going to fall behind in my emails, or pick whatever.
Yeah.
And because they're used to, well, this is the way I function. This is the way I operate.
Yeah.
So it's someone getting to a place of realizing, okay, the way I'm functioning is no longer sustainable. Something needs to change. Okay. Yeah. And so if they're open to that, then there are ways that we can look at. I often have people look at their pace and their space of, are you, what is your pace like on a typical day? If I had a hidden camera on you, what would I be seeing as you move about your day?
Yeah.
And where
are you saying yes to everything, or are there some no's you can say, right?
Yeah. And where's the white space? Like if I asked you to open up your calendar of choice, am I going to see appointments back to back to back to back?
Yeah. Or is you just can't do that. In there? We can't do that. I mean, I'm so big on that, Chris, that don't let that happen to our calendars, because if we don't have that white space, we can't breathe in between, and
we can't do a lot of things. First of all, we're not robots. I say that all the time. We're not human robots. We're human beings. We're not human doings. And so we need to give ourselves space to be. And when we allow ourselves periodic space to do whatever, to be still, to think, to
Mm-hmm.
breathe,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get our heads out of if we're kind of in the weeds, to get our heads out of the weeds of the day-to-day stuff. That helps us when we give ourselves the opportunity to do that. It actually helps us function better. We're
Yeah.
not designed to go, 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 go all the time.
I agree with that
Building in breaks.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah, building in breaks is so essential. It's not a sign of weakness to take breaks. It's what we need. Our bodies need it. Our brains need it to function at our best. And I'm not saying like, an hour break every day, although if you can do that, beautiful. But I'm saying to like take a break. If you work in a computer, take a break. I tell people to play with the time delta that works the best for them. For me personally, every 60 to 90 minutes, I make sure I'm getting up from my desk and either looking out a window, going outside, I work from home, so maybe taking a walk around the block around my house, just to get out and get fresh air, maybe fold a load of laundry, just again, get away from the computer for a bit and come back. But it allows you to be fresher. It allows you to problem solve much better. It allows you to be more innovative.
Totally.
And ultimately to be more productive.
Yeah. I talk often about time prosperity. And when I talk about time prosperity, it is the white space on our calendar. So making sure that we're building our business model that gives us the white space on the calendar. Because if we're doing back-to-back meetings all day long, we are gonna burn out. And then the other side of that is really the energy that we're moving through. How we move between meetings, how we move from the end of the day to the home life to, just if we're like always in a rush, that can be really, it starts to put tension on our bodies all the time if we're in a rush all the time. So if we can change that energy of how we're moving between, different parts of our day and breathing and feeling the spaciousness of time that's around us first. One of my favorite places to play with time prosperity is in the airport. If I'm going to go to the airport that day, I like to think, okay, I'm going to give myself the time and the space that I'm not ever rushing, because I don't want to rush. I don't want that energy, that pressure on me. And so, I'm one of those people that arrive to the airport, early, but then I take my time. I go to the, United Club. I go to, it's like I make space to just enjoy the day versus be in a rush. So that's how I talk about time prosperity.
Yeah, and that's such a great example. And when forward is a pace. So whatever allows you to go forward, you get to choose the pace at which you're moving. And when you do that, it allows you to be engaged more in life versus just letting it pass you by. Yeah. And that helps you to be more effective as a human being.
Cool. Very, very cool. So how do we distinguish between, because we have busy seasons in our lives, right? I think at my Ignite conference, and I don't use the word busy, I use the word full. I have full seasons in my life. When I get ready for my Ignite conference, I have my schedule's full. I'm planning, I'm doing all the things. And then there's other times of the year where that season is not as full. So how do we distinguish between a temporary busy season and the onset of true burnout?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. So I think it's knowing that that's coming up. It's just like if you were going to run a marathon. You're going to train and prepare for that marathon. You're just not just going to show up on marathon day and expect to be able to run a marathon. You have to train to prepare. So it's the same thing if we know we're going to have a busy season, not just show up to, say your busy season is Q2. You're not just going to show up at the beginning of Q2 and like, okay, I'm ready. Like prepare, think ahead to how do you need to stay fueled during that time? And what's going to prepare you? What can you do proactively beforehand to help you be as effective as possible? So fuel, you can think of energy as like 4 different tanks, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual energy. And what are the energy generators or infusers that will help you most during that time? Yeah. And then similarly, what are the things that are likely or have the potential to drain you? Yeah. And how are you able to minimize those? Yeah. I have what's the word I want to use? a term that I use, I call it the 3R rescue for dealing with those energy drains, or you can also use this for stress triggers. And when you identify your drains, you can either look at them from the perspective of, okay, can I remove this drain, or can I remove my exposure to it? Can I reduce this drain? Or if I can't remove it or reduce it, can I respond to it in a different way that brings me peace?
Yeah.
So
it's remove, say the 3 R's again, remove.
Yeah. Remove, reduce, or respond to it in a different way.
Okay. Excellent.
And actually, I shared that in a webinar recently, and one of the folks who attended came up with a 4R, which is reframe. So you can and that would be another one too.
Yeah.
Like, okay, can I reframe this in a way that also gives me more peace?
I think those are really useful for right now, because there's so much noise around us, right? And there's all the things that's happening in our world, and it's like, how do we can make some choices how information is hitting us.
Absolutely. If you think of everything as neutral, we human beings are the ones putting meaning on stuff. So a question we can also ask is, am I putting a meaning on this that's really true, or am I just making this up? And little secret, we're making it all up anyway. So why not pick a meaning that is still true, but might make us feel a little bit better? And that doesn't mean like putting rose-colored glasses on everything. There are tough and challenging things that happen in life. But are we staying in a place of despair, or are we letting ourselves kind of have a pity party when we need to, and then decide, okay, now how do I want to start moving through this? How do I process this emotion that I need to process, so now I can continue to move forward in a way that supports my well-being?
Yeah, I love that so much. I mean, I'm just thinking, not 15 minutes ago, I took a little dance break in my office, right? And so it's just like that, move the energy of, I'm really good at my daily meditations. I'm just very faithful to my daily meditations. And I think that means the world to my well-being. And I don't do these little dance breaks all the time, but there was just something that popped up on my computer, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. And it was like, it just moved energy. And I think we have to find these little moments of things that change things up for us, and
totally,
and move our energy in a positive way. So we're making choices to take care of our vessel, that is who we are.
To take care of our bodies, to take care of our personal space, how we want that. And that dance break is great. I mean, that's a great way to do a break. An average song's 2 to 3 minutes long. Put on a
got
song,
my breath going, it was
so why not?
It was fun. So do you think that the burnout in an entrepreneur looks different than in traditional careers?
It can, for a couple reasons. Okay. So let's talk about the entrepreneurs first. So typical entrepreneur, you get to set your own. The good news about an entrepreneur is your own boss. The bad news about being an entrepreneur is you're your own boss. And there can be seemingly no end to the day. So you could theoretically be working 24 hours a day. And
it won't work.
The only one who's going to stop you is you. Or if you live with a significant other, they might not like that idea too much. But the only one who's going to stop you is you. So it's being very conscious of what your work days look like. And typical entrepreneur days are not 9 to 5. They can, you might work 4 hours a particular day. You might work 12 hours another day. But it's again, preparing yourself to, when you know ahead of time that it's going to be a long day, how do you keep yourself fueled in a good way? And how do you prepare yourself? And how do you build in recovery time? That's another use of that white space we talked about earlier, is making sure, okay, after a late night of work, I need to make sure I build in that space. So as entrepreneurs, we have again, I'll go back to not only being our own boss, but we also have a lot more flexibility in deciding how to use our time and how to use our space. When in working in a traditional company, what comes into play there is company culture, and the company environment, which depending on our role, we may or may not have a lot of influence on. So there can be, and I say this to my corporate clients all the time, I can teach your employees all kinds of things about how to self-manage themselves to help prevent burnout. But if I'm sending them back to a toxic environment, this is going to have minimal impact.
Yeah.
So that would be the different thing, that the environment needs to be in a place where people feel psychologically safe to share if, uncle, I'm feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
or have a better idea of how to do things, where people aren't overworked, where people are treated fairly, where there's good communication. Like all that comes into play in supporting whether or not.
So when you're working with corporate clients, are you helping them? I mean, you're going in, are you working with the individuals and then also working with the culture of creating that healthier environment?
A little bit of both. And it depends on the company. So yes, I've done things from doing webinars to doing group coaching programs to working with the leadership team of a particular nonprofit in both helping them manage their stuff, but also to creating the culture that they wanted to create. So it kind of depends on the different companies and where they're at and what they're ready to look at too. And what they're ready to tackle.
Yeah. But my guess is if you're working with both sides, the success ratio is much higher if you're working with individuals and with the culture aspects of the company, because that's how you can really shift it.
Indeed.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write your book, Ignition, and how do you use that work in your work today with clients?
Yeah, I'm a huge reader. I've been reading ever since I was before kindergarten, in preschool. I can remember getting my first library card and going to library school.
Yeah.
Before they had daycare. But yeah, so I have a huge love of reading. So it's been a bucket list item of mine for a long time to write a book. And I just had to get to a place of writing about a topic that I was very passionate about. So when I decided to specialize in burnout prevention, the light bulb went off. Okay, this is the book. So it took me a couple years to write it.
I always feel like that's a good book if it takes you a while, because you're not just generating it in a weekend kind of thing. And it's actually your truth and it's what's meant to flow through you. So I believe in that.
Yeah, but I'm very pleased with the quality of it and how it came out. I hired a very good editor. I hired a very good person who did all the layout for the inside and the cover. And so I'm very pleased with it. And so that's what led to me creating it. And so number one, bucket list item. Number two, I realized I'm a one person show. So I can't possibly reach all the people who could benefit from needing this help. So a book would be great because anyone can
the ripple
get a book.
effect. Yep.
The ripple effect. And cost wise, if someone can't afford coaching or my services, it's a really easy way in to get yourself started and almost kind of self-coach yourself through these different elements. So there's that. I wanted something that would be a super business card that I could use in my business. So I've used it as a thank you for what I've met people. I've also used it for people who are thinking of hiring me. Typically corporations, I will send it after I have an initial conversation with the point of contact there. I'm like, gee, I'd love to send you a copy of my book so you can learn more. I've never had anyone say no. So I send them a copy of that. So it works out great that way. And then it's become a basis for a lot of my programs. So I've done a group coaching program inside one of my corporate clients, and we use this as the text. A lot of my webinars are based on one of the chapters in the book. In fact, I'm planning to do a webinar series for one of my clients on pretty much the whole book. So it's become an evergreen thing that has been really helpful in terms of providing different services.
Excellent. And there's a story about your husband's accident and how one of the principles in Ignition helped navigate that. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, sure. So my husband had a pretty bad accident a number of years ago where he was using a table saw in our backyard and it got stuck, and and this accident happened when I wasn't home at the time. But basically he cut his hand, and luckily we live in a very urban environment where the houses are very close together. So we started shouting for help, and thankfully one of our neighbors heard him, ran over with a tourniquet. Another neighbor called me. Someone else called 911. And by the time I got back home, I could see the ambulance at the end of the street taking him to, at the time I didn't know where. Long story short, they took him to a pretty major hospital in our area. And when I got to the hospital, he was on the gurney and his hand was all bandaged up. And he said, I said, okay, I found you. And, what happened? And he says, it's really bad. And I said, oh, okay, well, we'll do it. He's, no, it's really bad. Okay. And so I didn't know anything. And he said, but I have to tell you when it happened. I said, Chris is going to kill me. So we still had his sense of humor, and met with the surgical team. They're going on and on about all the possibilities and what we can do. And I think, can we just hold on a second? Can you just tell me what we're dealing with? And they said, oh, you didn't see it? I'm like, nope, don't need to see it. But
I just need to understand.
Yeah. So he had lost, he had mangled some of his fingers, and I think they were all just mangled at that point. So they were trying to figure out how many they could save.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll just wait. And while he's in surgery, and the doctor looked at me and said, do you live far away? I'm like, no, we live 10 minutes from here. And they said, oh, you can go home. This is going to be a while. He could be in surgery like 6 to 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, and the ironic thing is, at the time, I was taking a mindfulness course. I was taking a course called MBSR, which is John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction class. And that was, I think, the 4th or 5th. It was a weekly class, and I think that was the 4th or 5th session. So and this happened during the day, and the class was at night. So I called the instructor and basically just left a voicemail, said, I may or may not be able to come tonight. This is what's going on. And but I don't want to disrupt the class if I end up coming, and then he's out of surgery, blah, blah, blah. And the instructor called me back and said, just come. So I did. And then I got a call at the end of the class from the surgeon that he was out of surgery and what they had to do. But basically he ended up losing 2 on his left hand. He lost 2 fingers. And at the time he had initially lost his thumb, they reattached it, but then it ended up not taking. So we needed a second surgery a little later to deal with that. Yeah. So that was a lot.
Yeah.
And I wrote this summary in the chapter called Presence-Based Focused in Ignition, because yes, it was during when I took this mindfulness class, but there were some mindfulness principles that I ended up applying in the aftermath that helped me and help both of us. I describe presence-based focus as this triad of intention, attention, and impulse control. So from an intention perspective, in the aftermath of his accident, I just chose to follow his lead and how he was, and figuring out like day to day, like whether he needed me to make a phone call to someone, whether he needed to deal with something at his workplace, or reach out to one of his family members or a friend or something like that, follow up with something with the doctor. And then attention, really deciding what to pay attention to in terms of, I would accompany him to his occupational therapy and physical therapy appointments, just really paying attention to that, going to his follow-up visits with the surgeon, and just staying focused on that, and not getting in the place of, well, what if he can't go back to work? At the time he was cooking for a living. So I'm like, okay, what if he can't go back to work? Or maybe I need to pick up more hours or whatever. And I had to just get myself out of the what if thing and just be here.
To be very present.
And then impulse control, similarly, like not getting myself sidetracked if someone said something that was not helpful, or just being patient and kind of rather than like knee-jerk reacting to someone that might have pushed my buttons a bit, just coming back to, okay, let me just be present and be what's here, and how can I give this person compassion and give myself compassion, and how I'm going to respond.
Yeah. So using those principles really helped you move through that time in a much more grounded way. I mean, even just showing it very present in, what's happened and being very present. I see that all coming into play there. Yeah. Wow. What a story. What a story. Okay. So, where can people learn more about you and your work and get your book?
Yeah. Probably the best place is on my website, which is prioritywellness.com. That's the place to learn about me. You'll see a link to the Ignition book there, and a summary of me and my services. And I also have a newsletter that I do. It's called Energizing You, and you can see a way to subscribe to that.
Excellent.
I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so just find me on LinkedIn and feel free to follow me there.
Cool. And then 3 pearls of wisdom from you. So if the whole world could hear 3 pearls of wisdom from you, what would you love for them to hear?
Yeah, we hit on a couple of them earlier. The whole notion of pace. You always have the ability to control your pace.
I love that.
Space. Make time for space. And remember the acronym PRO. And this is something else you have control over, because when we're burnt out, we feel like I have no control over anything. Well, these are the things you always have control over: your pace of how you operate, creating space. And then from a PRO perspective, you always have control over your perspective, your reaction, and your outlook. You can always decide. So, and how well you're managing your pace and making room for space enables you to be a PRO better.
So your perspective, your reaction, and your
outlook.
Okay, cool. That's really good. Excellent. Well, I've learned some things in this conversation, Chris. Thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and just for all the good work you're doing in the world.
It's truly my pleasure, Cami. Thanks so much for this discussion.
You bet.